This came from, just came out, as a matter of fact. There's a report for what's called the Project Feeder Watch, which is a national thing run by Audubon in conjunction with Cornell. And it deals with birds that are listed over, I don't know how many years now, birds seen at feeders. I believe the Feeder Watch happens a month ago or something like that. It's a weekend date, and all your eBird checklists that are done on that date go into the Feeder Watch database. So then they divided the report up after an overview. They divided it up by region. So this is a list from the Northeast region. And basically it has to do with the number of feeder sites that were reporting, that submitted checklists on the Feeder Watch weekend. And it's interesting that they're ranked 1 to 25, but some of you have already remarked that it's odd that some of the rankings don't seem to fit what's around. For example, probably the easiest one to look at is white-throated sparrow. Most of us who can sweep away the blackbirds lately are probably inundated with white-throated sparrows and juncos. But you look at the region that's covered. If you see that little map at the top, the eastern region goes all the way up into Labrador. And white-throated sparrows beat up there, but not at Feeder Watch. They're down here then. And so those northern Maine and Canadian provinces are not reporting many of them, whereas down here we're getting a whole bunch. So that since these data are from the whole Northeast, the ranking depends a little bit on whether the birds are found throughout or in one area or the other, particularly in the wintertime. And that's why white-throated sparrows and even red-winged blackbirds, which are probably also in your grackle flocks right now, are showing up lower on because they're not found in the upper area in January when the Feeder Watch weekend is scheduled. So, but if you just go down the list, those 25 species, for the most part, they're ones that you could expect to see at your feeders this winter. Not necessarily as common or whatever. Purple finch is down. I've done well with those this year. But if there are names there that are not familiar, this is a chance to say, gee, I haven't seen this one yet. What's it look like? You can go to the Cornell site or whatever and have a look at it, or in your field guide. So that works out really well. We're going to do the blackbirds after, next week, because our field trip that week is up to Millington to a person's yard who's maintaining some fairly active feeders and habitat. So we'll look at the blackbird differences and some other species as well when we get back to away from waterfowl and back to our backyard birds, if you will. So and those of you who are here, or you can get it offline, you can get this list and sort of see how your feeders are faring up relative to that. Most of those species ought to become soon fairly common in terms of, or let's say familiar for the birds that you've seen. So that's where that's from. And there is a website for Project Feeder Watch if you want to know more about it. This is Oakley Street. Not this year. It was about 2-3 years ago that I went down there. Even this isn't as rich as expected. But I wanted to show you what we're going to be looking forward to and why I was so disappointed we couldn't get there last week. But there are about probably 4 species of ducks here. And I think you can see, if Arrow pick up, I'm not sure. Yeah, you know. See that guy there?
Yeah.
See the Roman nose? Okay, that's right. That's a canvasback. The dark-headed birds, smaller than the canvasback, that are showing up in there are lesser stalk, as the gunners call them, blackheads. There's a mallard there.
Yeah.
Okay, and these guys here with the white foreheads, those are widgeons. So those 4 species at least should be there in numbers when Oakley Street isn't frozen in.
Yeah.
Last Friday, I actually went down to see what it looked like. And I was surprised. There was a lot of ice on the river, and you can see the Canada geese in the background there standing up on it. It was fun. I was there yesterday. It was fun to watch them skid in when they landed. But the water immediately off the little end of the road there at Oakley Street did produce some ducks, and they were concentrated because that was the open water. And one of the interesting things about that view is that there are no diving ducks in there. So there are no canvasbacks, and there are no scaup and any other kind of duck. These are all dabblers except for the Canada geese. And let's home in on that a little bit.
What are the diving ducks getting there?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, further out it's frozen.
Further out is frozen, so they probably had to go to the open bay if it wasn't frozen all the way across. Some of you may have seen the Star Democrat, some article about ice boats in Claiborne. Yeah. So I don't know how far across that went, but probably there was some open water. Even though the chop tank, there was some open water there. Too far away to scope it or otherwise scan it. Certainly not for us. But if we look at within this block here and zoom in, we can get a little practice on species identification for the ducks that are there. So who's that? That's a mallard, right? Green head, white eye, white neck rig, and some other features. The drakes have white under the tail, and the top tail feathers are curled up. It's a dabbling duck, of course. And then these guys are yes, those are widgeon, American widgeon. Gunners call them bald pate because of the bald head. Boy, it's not bald, it's well feathered. And those were the two principal ducks. And when I was down there last Friday, I said, gee, there's only two species here. There's not the mixture that we usually see. By the way, this is a hen widgeon. Has the dark butt like the males do. Okay, white in the wing, but it doesn't have the splashback from the eye. Kind of pert little thing. I got some pictures of some yesterday. I may share them with you sometime. But there's another duck in here that I didn't notice when I was there. I wasn't there very long. Just took these kind of larger pictures. But there's another duck here that also is a dabbler, and we haven't talked about it yet. It's the one in the middle.
Oh,
this guy here. Now, it looks superficially like a hen, doesn't look like a hen widgeon, but it looks a lot like a hen mallard. Here's a hen mallard here. Here's a hen mallard here. Mallards, if you can see it, they have a what's called the speculum. It's the big metallic looking patch on the wing. It sometimes shows up when the wing is either forward or when the birds are in flight. And in the mallard, the speculum is bordered front, fore, and aft by two broad white lines. So when mallards are flying, you can see that fairly readily, and the hen also has that. This hen, you can see part of the white thing. Okay, but this bird is darker, right, than this body or this body. Okay, head contrasts with the rest of the body. Body being fairly dark, the head might look like a hen mallard, but that same complexion. But the contrast is pretty cool. This is an American black duck. One of the few dabbling ducks that breeds in the Chesapeake region to some degree. In fact, it's common enough that it sometimes hybridizes with mallards, and we often see a mallard black duck hybrid sometimes. But the dark body contrasting with the lighter head, and when the bird flies, and hopefully at Blackwater we'll see some of these, when the bird flies, the wing linings underneath the wings are really white, and it contrasts a lot with that darker body. So there's a new bird for you. I went down there yesterday and took some pictures. I don't have slides of those, but took some pictures down there. It was all ice. And all that was left down there were Canada geese, a couple of widgeons, not as many as showing here, and most of the mallards. But they were standing up on the ice, and I got some really nice close-ups with the digiscope. So maybe I can share that to you before we go down to Blackwater in a couple of weeks.
Is the black duck a male?
They look pretty much the same. The female actually has a slightly more off-colored bill, but I have trouble. I usually identify them by the company they keep. True for a lot of ducks with me. So, but anyway, I didn't know it was there till I had a look at the picture, and I said, that guy is different, and yes, it is. And it's a male and a female American black duck. Mallards and black ducks are the main dabblers that remain in the Chesapeake to breed. They also breed elsewhere. They're kind of our permanent residents here. black ducks breed fairly commonly down in the marshes south of Black Panther, southern Dorchester County, and over in southern Somerset and Worcester. Okay, so here we go again. I'm going to look at all of these birds in more detail in a minute, but just for fun, see, again, I always like to see what some people know. So let's start again with the upper left. Bird has a greenish head.
The mallard.
Yeah, you'd think so. But there are at least 3 ducks that we're going to look at that have green heads. This isn't one. This is one of them, but not a mallard. Mallards don't have that rich chestnut band. It actually goes under the belly and up the other side.
Northern shoveler?
That's the northern guy. He's using his pony here. It's okay. It's the northern shoveler. And when we blow it up a bit more in a few minutes, you'll get to see the bill it's like a mallard bill on steroids. Very, very big and broad.
So it's got a male and a female.
There is a female with their head tucked in.
Yeah.
The other 2 are drakes. Yep. All right, middle upper. Pretty bird.
Yeah, it is.
A little bit smaller than a mallard. It's a diving duck. Okay.
Yeah.
This is what gunners used to call the old squaw. I'll play the tape of why that is the case. I don't know what's politically correct or not, but the name has been changed back to its European name, which has precedence in this case.
It's like a buffalo.
And it's the long-tailed duck.
Long-tailed.
Okay?
Long-tailed duck.
Long-tailed duck. It's a diver. Pintails, remember, which also have a long pointed tail, but not curved up like that. Pintails are dabblers. So you see them with their tails in the air a lot. These guys dive. All right, this one kind of looks familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, but it's not what you think it is. It's a diving duck. Okay, it's aptly named. That's a drake and a hen in the background there. Relative to canvasback, it's much darker on the back. It's a darker gray. It has also a bill which is not. Notice the forehead is kind of sharp as opposed to the Roman nose. That's a redhead.
Oh.
Used to be thousands of them wintering in the Chesapeake region. Now they're kind of restricted. The place I've seen most of them reliably is down by Hooper's Island, but they do go through here. We occasionally try to pick one out of Oakley Street. So
Yeah.
we may get a good look at one. That picture is probably from Oakley. Okay, over on the left side again, we have a diving duck, or some class of them. In this case, notice the bill. It's not the spatula wide duck bill that you normally see. It's much thinner and narrower. And if I can blow it up, it has some teeth in it. It looks like teeth, striations. That's so it can feed on fish. And this one I'm fairly certain we'll see on the coast. It's the red-breasted merganser. And the drake often has a bad hair day. So does the hen. This is a saltwater merganser. The hooded merganser that I introduced last time we didn't get a chance to see yet. Hooded merganser has that big white hood, and we'll have a peek at those too.
Yeah, we had a set of those in front
And
of
we
the
had
house.
last one. Now we're frozen.
Yeah, now you're frozen in.
Ice skate.
Yeah. Hooded merganser likes kind of the upper parts of the tributaries, calmer waters. Red-breasted is on the open waters, sometimes on the ocean side, sometimes the coastal bays. More saltwater loving. We should see them around the drawbridge at Ocean City from one of the restaurants we can get on out of the window. This is a goose in the middle. And it's not one that winters much on Chesapeake. It's a rarity over here. But it's very common on the coastal bays and Ocean City. This is called a brant. It's a smaller goose than the Canada goose, and as you see, doesn't have the chin patch, has a little white mark on the neck. But they will come over on the coastal bay sometimes in very large flocks, and hopefully we'll see them at the inlet, if not elsewhere. Over on the right is not a duck in the middle row, but it dives. One of the things it has that show a little bit in the picture is that the hind legs are way in the back there. It's very well adapted for swimming and is very ungainly on land. It doesn't really water like a duck would. All diving ducks actually have their feet toward the back too, so they can propel themselves more efficiently.
That's moving though.
Yeah, this is a common loon.
Oh, yes.
Winter plumage. the dagger-like straight bill, it actually is a fairly large bird. It's larger than mallard and more elongated. We should definitely see that one in Ocean City in the inlet.
Yeah, that's,
Lower left is a shorebird. There are 4 or 5 species of what we generally called sandpipers or shorebirds that remain wintering along the Atlantic coast. All shorebirds migrate, and some of them at extreme distances, sometimes of several thousand miles a pop. I think the record-holding one is the bar-tailed godwit, which was tagged in Alaska, and they found when they finally recovered the tag, it had flown nonstop to New Zealand over a period of several days. I'll try to get the numbers sometime. This, however, is a little guy. And believe it or not, I bet you 10 to 1 you're familiar with it in the summertime. It's our latest shorebird, and I'll just name it now. We'll go look at it again in a minute. It's called the sanderling. And it's the little guy that goes back and forth with the waves that you see along the beach in July and August. But it really breeds in the tundra. It's an interesting bird also because of its migration. And look at that again if time allows. Okay, you know this guy in the middle? That's the great Mr. Chesapeake.
yeah.
And a few persist in the wintertime, usually in ice-free waters. It probably switches its diet from fish to frogs, maybe also some catfish down in Blackwater. But because it's all locked out now with ice, most likely we'll be seeing it on the coast somewhere along the edges of the bays. This particular bird is in full breeding plumage, showing these huge tassels and beautiful feathers from the neck down and all along the back. The most famous relative of that are the egrets, which are all white, that were almost extirpated by fashion folks in the late 1800s for women's hats. And fortunately, Audubon and others in time were able to get rid of that, make that illegal, along with fashion changes brought on by, to their credit, the ladies themselves, realizing that this was kind of a foolish way to take care of our wildlife.
So the ones that we see in the winter, 1 or 2 in our cove, at this point with ice, do they fly to the bay?
They'll try to find open water and hopefully find a frog or 2. They probably slow down their metabolism, just stay as warm as they possibly can. They'll also switch to whatever's around. So if a fish gets killed or something like that, they'll eat that as well. But along Blackwater, when it's ice-free, they'll often be feeding on small catfish come into the shallows. Not as many. They start breeding this is a colonial water bird. It breeds in rookeries, and they start arriving in numbers in late February, early March, when things start to thaw out. And there's a nice rookery at the end of Port Street here in Easton. If you look across the water there into the pine trees, you'll see them there. That rookery, last I saw, was still growing. I haven't been there a year or 2. Still getting bigger. There were used to be over a dozen nests. So it's kind of fun to just sort of watch them go through that. Here's an unfamiliar bird that can be quite abundant on the coast in the spring. If we get to see it, it'll be great. It's common enough that you might as well get familiar with it. And then if you ever go over in the coast up until about May or so, this is a bird you're likely to see.
Oh.
This, believe it or not, is a relative of pelican. All of the birds in that group have a gular pouch below the bill. In the pelican, it's quite accentuated. But in all of these birds, cormorants, and in this case, this is the northern gannet, they all have that pouch. Magnificent frigate bird, the tropics, man-o-war bird, whatever,
Yeah.
and the boobies, they're all related, and they all have that. So we'll have a look at that too, and we'll cross our fingers on seeing that, but it is a very common bird later in late winter and into spring off Ocean City and inlet, and also in Indian River.
Poplar Island.
Yeah, Poplar Island, we get them in the bay. Less in the fall than in the spring, but they come migrating up the bay following the small menhaden, I guess. They come up the bay and have been seen as far north as Chestertown, up the rivers. I've seen them once in a while crossing over the Chop Tank in springtime.
On your comment about the feathers, the ostrich feather was the other one they used in hats. And
Yes, they did.
And why they lost interest was the convertible. Once you had convertibles, you couldn't wear hats.
It wasn't just those birds. Of course, that was the big millinery trade. But actually, at that time, fashion was such, they even had songbirds, whole birds mounted.
Yeah, right.
Yes, woodcock and all kinds of.
Put a throw on your head.
No explaining taste is all I can say, but whatever it was, they convinced people that that was the fashion. It's attributed to being started by Marie Antoinette. But whether that's legendary or apocryphal, I don't know.
Got it.
But the first real game warden was an Audubon, I forget his name now, but it was an Audubon employee, was killed by poachers in Florida right around the time they started to implement the law to prevent them from killing these birds. And these, again, they're colonial water birds, so they breed in huge colonies. The hunters would go in and simply take the adults, strip the feathers off, kill them, and the young were left to starve. So it was a very nasty kind of trade to begin with. All in the name of fashion promoted by businesses. Okay, let's just go through some of these guys in more detail. For geese, of course, everybody knows the Canada goose. That's kind of our model for this. But here's the brand. The brand itself is smaller than a Canada goose, much darker, does not have the chin patch, much shorter bill, and tends to occur in fairly large flocks in the coastal bay, sometimes flocks numbering hundreds of, even thousands. This is actually in the mid-Atlantic, one of the primary wintering areas for brant, which breed like Canada goose, or at least migratory Canada geese, up in the Arctic Shield, up in northern Canada. So we're seeing something here that's very common now and fairly easy to identify. It's the only other goose other than snow geese that you'd likely encounter. And it is mainly a quack. You'll see it sometimes up on the barrier island, sitting on a golf course or some other small park, but very often it's in the water. And usually when you see one, you see a couple dozen. Doesn't call like a Canada goose. If time allows, I'll play the call for you. I'm trying to not go back and forth, so makes it easier on everybody.
Looks like
Our real dabbling duck, of course, is the mallard. And we also introduced the bird we should see at Blackwater in a couple of weeks. At least that end of it. That's the pintail, the other spike-tailed duck. And say that's often what you'll see, but these are dabblers. They have to reach down and pick and get to the vegetation that's decaying on the surface of the bottom, or perhaps feeding on mollusks and crustaceans in the mud itself. Here's a new one. This is a wintering species that is commoner on the coast. We do get it inland. I've seen it over at Cook's Hope sometimes, but it looks very, well, I don't know, plain. The bird is called a gadwall, and it is a dabbler. I've just read about it today. It actually can reach down further than some of the other ducks. I don't know quite why, but it does not dive. It has a dark butt, and otherwise looks gray. And here's our friend a little bit blown up. Here's the northern shoveler, and you can begin to see why it's called a shoveler. Look at this, look at that overdone bill. Very broad. It's basically functions as a sieve. And I'll show you in a minute how the shovelers typically feed. They basically take in water and squirt it out between the small indentations in the edge of the bill and swallow anything that's caught that way. Well-named shoveler. Actually, it's related to teal, which also have kind of broad bills, but nothing like that. When you blow the gadwall up a bit, you can begin to see that it's not just plain Jane gray. Beautiful, beautiful patterning in the gray feathers of a gray, darker gray and white, and these very long white feathers above the wings, they're called the scapulars, also show up really well. It's a very handsome duck when you get close enough to it to get a picture with a decent resolution. This one was taken probably in one of the freshwater ponds over on by the coastal bays where we hope to go. But whether we're going to get freshwater or ice, I don't know.
According to Peterson, that's a male, female brown.
Browner, very plain. And again, I often identify the females of the hens because of the company they're keeping. Absolutely right. There's the shovelers again, but this is one way in which they feed. Sometimes they do this in flocks of scores, but usually around here, I've seen them 15 or 20 at a time. What they're doing is collaboratively feeding. They're swimming in circles with, as the duck on the right shows, the bill just below the surface, sometimes down as far as eye deep. They're not tipping up, although they can. They are dabblers. They can tip up and they can feed that way. This is collaborative feeding. And what they're doing is swimming in circles in shallow water, picking up the sediment. And then they use their bills to sieve that sediment and pick up the animals that are contained within. And when you have 16 or 20 of them doing that, there's a fair amount of sediment being stirred up. So they collaborate.
And what animals are down there? You got little clams and things?
Yeah, mainly more like amphipods and small spider-like things, small crabs, things like that. Yeah. But also other things, whatever's organic, they can filter out, and that includes some plant material, just pieces.
Right.
This one of the places that we're not going to be able to go to, I don't think, on our trip, and we won't be able to repeat it, is a place called Heron Park over in Berlin, Maryland, which is an old. They reclaimed that they were sedimentation ponds from the chicken processing industry. Been reclaimed as wetlands and used for a walking park. A lot of people walk their dogs there, but the ducks love it because the sediments are really rich and it's only about this deep in most places. And the shovelers come in there large numbers in later winter and spring. If it's not as iced out, you can see this behavior there.
These birds have like tiny eyes. Do they use vision for much of anything? I mean, that the geese can see us for sure.
Tiny might be relative because they're fairly big-headed.
Yeah.
So I would have to say that yes, they do use their vision, and probably they're sharper in terms of vision, some sense than we are, because at least some migrating birds can see ultraviolet light.
Yeah.
They can even see as a bluish color, I'm told. This is for shorebirds. They can see lines in the magnetic field that stimulates cells in the retinas of their eyes to produce a color. So I can't say for in this particular duck whether what its vision acuity is. The eye might look small relative to the head, but it also might be a protection, having smaller eyes, perhaps, because of the way they feed.
Yeah.
By swimming around in circles in mud.
Close your eyes.
Yeah, exactly. The shoveler, kind of like a canvasback, it has quite a profile when it's in the air because of the size of that bill. It doesn't have the sloping forehead, but you can see that bill size at a long distance. And if it's a drake, you can also see the rusty band that goes all the way around underneath. And they have beautiful blue wing patches. Wow. So it's a very handsome duck indeed, even if it does look like it should never get cold. Okay, here's some widgeons so you can sort of see what they look like when they're in a group. There's some hens, there's some adults. Most of these pictures, I think the one on the lower left might be at Oakley Street, but the one in the upper right is on one of the ponds, possibly the one I mentioned at Heron Park. And the widgeon in the middle of all that is one that was sitting on the ice several years ago when I visited Oakley Street. So ice there is not totally unknown. American widgeon, but there's another widgeon that normally I wouldn't be in a course like this trying to tell you all about the common birds, but once in a while, if you know the common birds, you'll see the weirdo. And in this case, I know there's one over there. I just hope we can find it. This is a different widgeon. It is the Eurasian widgeon. which breeds mainly in the upper parts, Russia and that part of Asia and over into Europe. There are a couple of colonies in the United States and a few winter in this region here. By a few, I mean, you may see one with a hen or something like that, but they're usually affiliated with the American widgeons. But that brown head with it's a tannish area on the front as opposed to pure white. That shows up actually very well when you see that kind of head in a flock of hundreds of American widgeons. You know, you're on your first year raising. And there was one at Lone Point Golf Course on the 1st of January, so we may just drop by there and see if there's any water there. There were a lot of widgeons on the land, so skim through that. But anyway, it's a rarity. And when you submit an eBird checklist with that one on there, it'll get reported as a rare bird. So maybe we'll have something. That's always fun to have something. Those were all dabblers. These are diving ducks. The one that we used as sort of to introduce them was the pintail, not to introduce diving ducks, but because it has a long tail. And the bird on the right is another, it's a picture taken by someone in our birding course a couple of years ago when I was focusing on waterfowl. It has a long tail. It's hard to see in that particular picture. Here's a more handsome one. This is credit to Cornell in this case. I'd love to get a shot like that. Maybe this midnight year, who knows? I was down at, as I said, I was down at Oakley Street yesterday, and it was 37 degrees, which is about what it's going to be on the coast, maybe a little warmer. And I had my gloves off, and I was doing just fine. So it was nice and comfortable. If it's not too windy, it's going to be just fine. Any case, this is the long-tailed duck, formerly called old squaw, and it's a more compact, slightly smaller duck than a pintail or a mallard, and likes open water, being a diving duck. It's fairly common, even abundant in Chesapeake Bay when it's not frozen over, but usually pretty far offshore. Once in a while, if there are enough of them out there, you'll get some closer and you can see this. This is in winter plumage. This is not its breeding plumage, as handsome as that may be. And I don't have a picture of it in breeding plumage, but we'll go to Cornell and look at that in a few minutes. But that's the colorful looking male that you see. The female is plainer, but otherwise you would have no trouble probably identifying it. It's a long-tailed duck once you know what it is. Our canvasback with the Roman nose. There's the redhead. Okay, now you can compare the two. See the difference in the jizz, just the shape of the head, even if you couldn't see the color. That Roman nose of the canvasback is pretty much diagnostic.
Yeah.
It also has, at least in the Drake, a much, much whiter back. Canvas, at the time this duck was named, canvas was bright white. We have canvases of other colors now, but canvas used to be pretty much a very white cloth. Redheads have a grayish back. They also have a colorful bill. It has a ring on it and a darker tip. Females have that whitish face. But overall, if you couldn't see the bird's colors, other than perhaps whether the back is bright or not, and that Roman nose, you would not have a problem picking up redheads. Sometimes there are lots of them around. It's become generally uncommon in this part of the Chesapeake. But we get a few every year on Christmas count, and as I say, down at Hooper's Island, there used to be thousands of them. I don't know what the story is like now. This is another bird that's a diving duck. It's smaller than the redhead and canvasback, a little more compact. It might first remind you of a skull.
Yeah.
Okay, the head shape is really rather different. Again, we'll have to go to Cornell to compare the two, but the head shape is rather different. It's much more block-headed. And instead of having a hint of a crown, it has pretty much of a big blob there, giving it this kind of triangular head appearance.
That are ring-necked duck.
This is the ring-necked duck. Good point. And the diagnostic thing about that, one, yeah, the head helps a lot. But the other thing is that, see that white line? It's a right triangle coming up from the water. That shows up at a long distance in the drakes. And so that plus the shape of the head is enough of the gist to tell you it's a ring-necked duck. Interestingly enough, The name ringneck has to do with what gunners saw after they shot him and the dogs brought him back, because there's a very dark brown ring around the neck. But you can't, I have never seen it in a while, but you can see it in your hand. It's kind of like the red-bellied woodpecker, right? So that it was named that way and it stuck. To me, it's more like a ring-billed duck, but it'll have to do. This duck, while it's a diver, can be on fairly small bodies of water. It still has to run along the surface to take off, but not as far as some of the larger diving ducks. So you can see it in inland areas. It's one of the first ducks to come back after ice out. So if we get any areas that are thawed down there, this is the likely bird we'll be able to see. If not, there used to be a great spot for them at Blackwater, although some of it's grown over now. We'll have to just see what we can get down there. Ringneck duck. And remember this guy with skunkhead? This is the surf scoter. It's the diving duck, one of 3 actual species of SCOTERs. When I was doing the waterfowl version of this course a couple of years ago, we found some off Tillman Island and very badly black lit, but I got one digiscope photo that shows the difference here. This bird is called the black scoter. It's about the size of a surf scoter, but its head does not have the skunk pattern, and it has instead a very orange knob at the base of the bill where the forehead meets. And that's noticeable in drakes at some distance, at least in decent light. But the lack of the patterning on the head is very helpful in this regard. Some of the scoters do stick their tails up, particularly in breeding season or as they're beginning to think about breeding before they leave for breeding grounds up north. And so once in a while, a novice might confuse that with the ruddy duck, the stiff tail we talked about before. The tail is never as erect as in a ruddy duck, and the bird is longer and darker. So that confusion, once you get familiar with the bird, should be okay. Here's a picture taken by a birder who visited Indian River Inlet in the end of January, which tells me good things about the fact that we're going to go there, and that inlet should be productive for us. It was full of ducks last year. And so this is not my picture, but it's a picture he took and posted to his eBird checklist. And you can see in much better light just how gaudy that knob is on the drake. And here's some others taken by Kelly White, who was just back there the day before yesterday, I think. Also taking pictures. This was the end of January. And it's kind of nice. Here you see the erect tails, sort of the duck starting to display in the black scoter. This is a female or hen black scoter, which looks like it has basically a slash back on the top of the head and then white cheeks. And this is a female or hen surf scoter, which shows 2 big white dots on the side of the head. So you can tell those 2 apart. There's another scoter there, which is much rarer, called the white-winged scoter. If we see it, I'll point it out in what the field marks are. All 3 scoters, at least in the drakes, are fairly easy to tell apart. Okay, remember when we looked at the hooded merganser, we had some pictures there with the drake's crest fully erect and a big fan. Looks very different from a bufflehead, which does not have the black border on the back. The bufflehead is not a fan. It's always open. It's always up on the back of the head. But in the hooded merganser, it can go up and down. Here's one that has it partially shut. And I mentioned the coiffure of the head being a much more neater kind of crest you're going to see in the red-breasteds.
Yeah.
This is the hooded merganser. It's the smallest of the 3 that we get around here, and is more likely to be found in the upper tributaries or even on freshwater ponds that are iced out. Handsome bird. On the other hand, on the coast, we're often going to see this bird here. This was taken again by someone in the birding course a couple of years ago, and this is a female or perhaps maturing, immature red-breasted merganser. You can see the kind of bushy crest, sometimes very bushy, and that's the red-breasted merganser. All the mergansers have that thin, non-duck-like bill. It's not a dagger, but it's just a long bill, fairly narrow. And it does have serrations on the edge because these diving ducks actually feed largely, if they can, on fish. So there was a nice red breasted here. Actually, the head is often green like a mallard's, but again, that's a refracted light and it depends on the sunlight. So in this particularly nice picture that Cornell has, you can see what I mean about bad hair days.
Yeah.
The eyes red?
Yeah, the eye is red. Bill, see, is not spatulate. It's much more thin and conical. It's called red-breasted merganser because the feathering on the breast at any distance makes it look robinish red. It's a fairly decent-sized bird. It's the only drake of the mergansers that has the bad hair day. The hooded merganser has that very nice hood, and the common merganser, which might show up at Blackwater, in which case I'll probably preview it for you later, has a smooth head.
I think his hair is good.
Well, so does he. And the females are equally ragged like that. You can tell the two, at least, that it's not a female hooded merganser by that neat coiffure, much more comb look.
Why red breast though?
Red breast because at a distance, this area looks robinish red.
Oh.
Okay. It's a reddish kind of rust color. So hence the name. And it does kind of look like that. And we should see it from Boomer's restaurant. When we go down there, we should see it. There are some other, they're common, sometimes abundant up in the northern part of the Atlantic, but they're common enough, especially at the inlets, that they're worth looking for. This bird here is not my picture. It was taken by Eric, again, at the end of January. This is an eider, E-I-D-E-R. In this case, the common eider. The common eider is fairly easy to tell if you get a drake, but most of them are not. Most of them that are going to be down there are going to be like this, fairly dingy and brown. It's a sizable duck. But if you can get a good look at the bill, you'll see that the bill extends up into the actual, almost the crown of the head.
Yeah.
It's a big extension like this. And that shows up fairly well, especially with the spotting scope, but often in binoculars, because occasionally they'll be nearby. This is a picture at Indian River Inlet. We do get them in Ocean City as well, so we may see at least this version here, which is either an immature male or a female. But again, that extending up into the head itself. That's the common eider, and they nest in the open. They winter in the open ocean is by preference. Sometimes in thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, off Chatham, Massachusetts, off Cape Cod, off New York, but generally farther out at sea. We just get a spillover. A few of them close to the shore, especially at the inlets. And then everybody wants. And Kelly White's picture convinces me that it's worth going after. This is the harlequin duck. Harlequins breed in Alaska and also in Greenland, Iceland areas. They breed typically in upland areas along streams. I have seen them in Alaska. They can go underwater in a stream and pop up against the current, hundreds of feet away. They really are great at navigating flowing water like this. In the wintertime, they tend to be concentrated, since most of the streams are frozen, they tend to be concentrated along the coast, and occasionally they spill down as far as here. This is a harlequin duck, and there's a picture taken by one of the YMOS kids up at Forsyth Refuge in Barnegat, one of the two up in New Jersey, in 2021. He got this amazing picture. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous drake. The female has 2 white spots on the face. It doesn't have all of these colors. There has been a female at Indian River Inlet ever since Christmas, but the drake just showed up in the last couple of weeks, and hopefully it'll stay. Before I was taking pictures of birds, now about 15 years ago, I was in Ocean City, and there were more than a dozen of these right behind the Oceanic Hotel, where we're going to be taken down on the back bay, within 100 feet. And me not taking a picture, I missed huge opportunity. There's almost never that many. Usually, nowadays with eBird and everything else, if you find one drake, that's great. But it's worth looking for because it's so spectacular. And it's on in with some other interesting species that are more common. So we'll see. It's there. It was there a couple days ago. Okay, these long sleek birds with the dagger-like bill, the feet are way on the back. You can kind of see this one paddling along here. Very ungainly on land. That for the most part, they push themselves along as opposed to waddling. Their nests in the breeding grounds are often very close to water. This is the common loon. And the profile with the dagger-like beak and the fact that it holds that beak more or less horizontally tends to help identify it. This is the winter plumage. We'll look at a summer plumage one in a minute. Maybe even listen to the old Golden Pond call.
Yeah.
We do hear that occasionally here. But the nice thing about Ocean City Inlet and also at Indian River is the likelihood of seeing a second species of loon, which is less familiar to most people, but not uncommon. And this is the red-throated loon. Again, in winter plumage, so you cannot see the red throat. Profile-wise and gist-wise, it's thinner necked overall. A little bit, it's a bit smaller and a little bit more snake-like. One field mark that works out pretty well, the lower mandible is chiseled a bit more than in a common loon, and it makes the bill look upturned. And you can usually see that at some distance. So you see a whiter, kind of lighter bird, longer neck, and that chiseled bill, you've got yourself a red throat.
Why do they have separate classification from ducks? Right,
They do look like ducks, but their anatomy inside and elsewhere is very different. Very different. Used to be at one time they would put in the front of field guides, where field guides try to be taxonomically more primitive, whatever that means, to more advanced. Now that we know a lot more about the genetic relationships of these things, geese are slightly more primitive and they'll appear in most field guides first. And the loons are further on. And we're still revising that. DNA has done an awful lot to help you that. But there are other behaviors as well in terms of how they feed, the bill shape, so on. So that not everything on the water is a duck.
Yeah.
There's not, we see a solitary one pretty commonly there, but this winter's the first time I heard them call, and I figured there have to be two of them if they're calling.
Not necessarily.
No.
Not necessarily. You begin to hear that yodeling. They kind of go, oh, oh, sometimes even in winter.
Yeah.
But the longer drawn out, oh, kind of call is a breeding ground call. But I've heard
It's called the whale.
before they leave.
Whale on a breeding
There
ground.
you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty much.
So we do that, hear that here. They used to feed in fairly large numbers in the fall off the mouth of the Chop Tank and elsewhere in the Chesapeake, feeding on peanut menhaden, small menhaden like that. But the menhaden population has gone down through the overharvesting,
Well,
and so they're not as common there anymore, and they have to resort to other species. And so many of them actually go elsewhere where food is more abundant.
They said that with the ospreys too, right?
Yeah.
Even worse.
Yeah.
Even worse. Ospreys are nests are failing. They'll start to nest and then the nest will be abandoned or fail. The lack of menhaden is partial, that's food, but also menhaden are very rich in oil. And that oil is necessary for the young to mature correctly, get enough nutrients out of it. So you can sometimes see osprey nests abandoned after the eggs have been laid. We hope to reverse that, but so far that fishery for menhaden is just destroyed. Not only that, but I'm a blue fisherman. Ain't no bluefish in the bay anymore.
Wayne, they say in the book that loons slowly sink. What's that?
Yes, they can basically compress their feathers and sink down in the water. So sometimes just the neck is above the surface. Apparently that's a way of either defending the nest or avoiding being hunted or shot back in the golden days. So yeah, they can do that. Grebes do that too, as I'll show you in a second. They're related. These are elongate birds, and loons are big. They're bigger than mallards, and the profile is important, not just for the upturned bill and the red throat, but the horizontal dagger-like bill overall. So important. Grebes are related to loons, but they're generally thinner necked, smaller birds, feed closer to shore than loons do. A red-throated loon can be off, way off the jetties in Ocean City Inlet. And if you're in a boat, you'll see them even further than that. Our common winter grebe here is the horned grebe. Again, I will show you in breeding plumage, and we have a few minutes here at the end. But this is winter plumage, tends to be big white cheeks, fairly short bill held horizontally, not anywhere near as massive as a common loon. These are smaller birds, and they look kind of tailless because they don't have much on the rear end. But they do fly and can fly very well. By the way, common loon in particular goes flightless shortly after Christmas for several weeks, where it cannot fly. It molts such flight feathers all at once, so it better be when there's food during that time. Okay, some grebes do the same, not our horned grebe so much, but the ear grebe, which is a more western species, actually goes flightless for a lot of the year. So anyway, the other grebe we might see if we don't get iced out is the pied-billed grebe. Similar type of profile, but thicker necked and thicker headed, more likely to be found on fresh water. It does apparently breed in Maryland a little bit. Excuse me, not too often. That's its winter plumage. They pied billed, which would imply that there's a mark on the bill, a pied mark, and from Cornell. It really is a picture, but it's kind of a painting, but it's just backlight. But anyway, the pied-billed grebe does have that ring around the bill in the springtime, and it's a much richer rusty color. Potomac River is a good place to see them, but we get them on the coast, again, because they may be iced out further up. We'll try very hard. There was one on the 1st of January, at least, in a pond I'm going to visit. Let's see, there's one pond there that it's in a development, the residents aerate. So the bubbling may, in fact, create some open water. And if there is open water, ducks will find it. And we may see some concentrations there if they're doing that. So we'll maybe a grebe or two, maybe a merganser. Shorebirds. Shorebirds are spectacular, and yet a lot of people don't know a lot about them anymore. Because of our developments on the coast, the lack of breeding habitat in some cases, and the fact that most shorebirds breed in the far north, in the tundra and the taiga, up in northern Canada, James Bay, up into Alaska, along the Arctic Shield, and many of them migrate long distances from there, coming down through, sometimes along our coast to areas where they stage and refuel. And they continue on to wintering grounds in South America, as far south sometimes as Tierra del Fuego. And this is one of them. This is the sanderling. It is our lightest shorebird. And usually you see it on the beach, but depending on the wintertime and what food is available, you sometimes see small flocks like this on the rocks at the jetties, Ocean City Inlet, where this picture was taken, and also the Indian River. Sanderling. This is the clockwork orange bird, the one that goes along with the waves and comes back, goes along with the waves, comes back in the wash, and it appears on our beaches sometimes in July and August. Those birds are one of two. There are some birds that juvenile birds that don't migrate all the way to the breeding grounds in their first year, so they actually stay around. And then the others are shorebirds, for the most part, have precocial or precocious, if you will, young. That is, the young, after they hatch, are immediately able within a day to fend for themselves. And the parents often help a little bit, but then the parents leave early and go to staging grounds ready for their long migration south. And some of them show up along our coast here as early as late summer. So those shorebirds that you see along the beach, going back and forth with the waves, some of them may actually have come from Baffin Bay. They're now feeding along the beaches as they head south. the distribution of this bird is pretty amazing because it actually winters all along the Atlantic coast, the Gulf Coast, down into South America along the coast, all the way down into southern Argentina. And that's an interesting fact, maybe. But think about this. How does a bird from Argentina know to go back to Baffin Bay relative to a bird at Ocean City Inlet that does the same thing? What's the trigger? How does it know? What directions does it follow? What sets it off to say it's time to migrate? Because in many cases, these birds arrive within days of the same day of the year, same place. Bird migration is absolutely fascinating. Here's a bird that you're seeing on the beach, kind of reminds me of some of the things about the white-throated sparrows and juncos and so on. Things are happening right before our eyes that are just fascinating, and we don't have answers to them. The commonest wintering shorebird along the mid-Atlantic, at least, is this little bird. Mousy gray above, longish bill, slightly decurved at the end, sometimes in enormous flocks, and it's called a dunlin. Old name in the old textbooks was red-backed sandpiper. Again, I don't have a picture of that in breeding plumage, but time allowing, we'll go to Cornell and have a look at it. But this is what you'll see in the wintertime. On the back bays at Ocean City, if they're not iced over, you'll sometimes see flocks of hundreds, if not thousands of them. And they're well known for their ability to fly in unison. The flock will move along like this, and everybody turns at once, and you get a different kind of sunlight on it, and so on. Very spectacular. Dunlin does this in spades. It's a very entertaining bird to see, even if you can't see it very close. Sometimes you have to spot scope it across the bay on a sandbar or something like that. But it's probably the commonest of our visiting winter shorebirds here. Not the only one. Then we get a spectacular dude like this. This is the American oyster catcher. And it does a few do winter in Ocean City. And I saw them on the 1st of January, so hopefully there'll still be a few around if it's not too icy. And we'll have a look for them. They're kind of noisy, and I'll play this call again if we go to Cornell all the time. But that bright, big red bill and that black and white contrast, females look the same as the male, is pretty diagnostic. And this is a large bird, about twice as big as your sandpipers, and nicely long-legged. Also on the rock jetties are the ruddy turnstones, again in winter plumage. This was taken again by a member of the course when we were looking at water birds, and they have a kind of chisel-like bill. Yeah. This is larger than the little sandpipers, sort of killdeer size, shorter leg, bright orange legs, and they feed in part by turning over stones. They do that. They also pick along rack and other materials on rock jetties. And in breeding plumage, it's spectacular. A little bit of that chest pattern is retained in the wintertime, but you can see these birds in breeding plumage in May during the peak of shorebird migration. So absolutely beautiful bird, but it is one of the wintering shorebirds here. And this will be the tough one for us. Again, you get it by difference by getting familiar with the other ones. This is about the size of a turnstone, but it doesn't have that chisel-like bill. It's usually darker than that. This is a lousy picture, but the legs are yellow, and this is called the purple sandpiper, and it's an Arctic breeding bird. We get a few down here. I know they're at Indian River Inlet. I don't know about Ocean City. Once in a while, you get bunches of them, 40 or 50. Usually, you see them kind of solitary. But they particularly seem to be obliged to feed on the rocks. They are seldom seen on the beach. They're found on the rocks themselves. So if you go by there, and later in the spring in particular, it's a bird worth looking for. It's fairly dark. This lousy picture accentuates the light colors that really aren't there. Okay, then we'll come to the good old big old Earnshaw there. Great blue heron. But we're going to visit a spot that's also a good potty break. after we do the inlet, we're going to go behind West Ocean City's shopping center on Golf Course Road. And in the past, there has been a colony, it's a wintering colony of black-crowned night herons. This bird is about half the size of the great blue, chunkier overall with a more stout neck, although it can extend it rather long when it's feeding. It feeds like a great blue and stalking along the edges of water, looking for frogs and small fish, but it tends to feed primarily at night, particularly when it's not feeding young. And so it flies out of its roost at twilight and flies back in twilight in the morning. It has two long streamers down the back. It has this nice broad crown and two long streamers here. These are actual feathers down the back. The young the immatures are very speckly brown. The colony, as of the 1st of January, I think I had 2 adults and 2 young ones. We've had up to 24. We'll see.
Have you ever seen them in Baltimore?
They do occur in various locations around this region.
Yeah, that's the square right in the city.
There you go. And in Avalon in New Jersey, there's a yellow crowned night heron colony. It's a different species. And I think there was some over on the C&O Canal area there breeding. They're colonial like great blue herons. They're colonial water birds. Sometimes they will nest with great blues. They do that on Poplar Island. But having a winter colony is hard to find. So it's amazing. Here they are right behind the shopping center. And with all the other disturbance that goes on. But I've found them 9 times out of 10. So we'll see this time after all the big blow.
Yeah.
Maybe the warmer weather will bring some back. As I mentioned, the Pelecaniformes is a group of birds related to what we would call pelicans. We have the brown pelican here in the Chesapeake region. It has now been seen at every month of the year on the coast. Probably not as quite every month of the year in the Chesapeake, but certainly well into late winter. We occasionally get it on the Christmas bird count. This brown pelican, it has it's a recent introduction to Maryland as far as breeding is concerned. When I first moved back to Maryland in the early 80s, there were none of them here. A few years later, they started to find nests and colonies in the coastal Bay Islands. So it became a Maryland first breeding record, and now they breed very regularly there, and also in the Maryland portion of very south Chesapeake Bay and into Virginia. So again, if you go to the beach or if you're at the beach in the summertime, you're likely to see groups of these birds flying along near the water surface. All the pelican-form birds have another interesting habit about flying. They tend to flap, 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 and then glide. Flap, 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 and then glide. Cormorants do it. Pelicans do it. Sometimes the pelicans will actually dip their tips of their wings in the water as they glide along the surface. But that's a fairly characteristic of all these birds. And the pouch, of course, for pelicans is great, but for some of the others, it's hard to see. So we have the double-crested cormorant here. This is a breeding adult that I photographed at the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel some time ago, just about to take off, just after defecating. A real surprise for me was this one, which we are probably going to see. This is in a breeding plumage version of the great cormorant, which is a largely northern and European species, but does spill over into the North Atlantic on our side. And in normal non-breeding plumage, it's pretty much all dark, but it is bigger and huskier, if you will, than a double-crested cormorant. When you see them flying, they really look almost like vultures, ponderous wingbeats. In breeding plumage, they get this silvery hairs, and they all, adults at least, all have this white below bill. And in breeding plumage, the adults have this white hip patch, which is visible, fairly visible even in flight, but they lose that for most of the year. This picture was actually taken at Ocean City back when I was learning how to do some digiscoping. It's the only one I've ever seen here in this kind of plumage. This probably was taken in April. But I just saw some pictures from someone who visited over the weekend. Midweek, the Indian River Inlet, and there were several of them, including some in this form. So we'll have a chance to see a bird that's not very common, but again, you can tell it's different by comparing it to the more familiar double crested.
They have the same, like snaky neck.
Yes, and one other thing about cormorants on the water, they look like loons. They're that size, but they tilt their bill up.
Yeah.
And loons, strictly horizontal. And that's a fairly easy way to tell them apart when they're swimming. They are diving birds, they're not ducks, but they're diving birds. And someone mentioned the fact that they've seen double crests out on buoys, drying their wings. They don't have as much oil in their oil gland as ducks do. And so the foliage soaks up water. And that's thought to be an advantage for them since they're pursuing fish underwater, helping them keep down. They can dive deeper and swim faster, but they have to dry out. We'll pursue this one. We'll look for it. I have a few minutes. I will try to scan with the scope. Maybe we'll get some close in. But this is the northern gannet, which breeds in huge seabird colonies in places like the Gaspé Peninsula, Bonaventure Island, and the mouth of the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and up around Greenland, Iceland, and down into northern Scandinavia. This is a very large bird, much larger than a gull, very different shape. When you see it in the air, it tends to be pointed at all ends. And a lot of the birds are immatures, which are often dusky brown, particularly in the fall. As they start to molt, they get this type of piebald type pattern. But the shape and the gist is really important. And flapped glide. So if I see any gannets or I can point out anything like that to you, flat, glide. Gulls all the time. Gannets, flapped glide. So, and they do some spectacular diving for fish, and I'll try to show you that if we have time at the end of the talk. Okay, that's the northern gannet. If you're from Florida or go down to Florida, you will probably hear about boobies, brown boobies, and so on, and they're related.
Yep.
Okay, that's enough of that. This shoveler say goodbye. And see what I say about that bill. Okay, all right. Any questions at this point? I didn't want to go back and forth to Cornell, so I'm going to be able to stop this now. And we'll go to. All right, I'm going to show you this now because it's pretty spectacular, and I'm not sure it's going to work.
Oh, these are.
I found another link this morning, but this one's pretty cool. Okay, I don't want to get help. I don't know. All right.
Yeah, like.
Feet up. They don't splash much.
And where does?
You see the fishing. When I was down with and just south of Ocean City Inlet, easily see. Go back. The characteristics of these birds.
If we have videos like things like that, can you show them at some point?
Sure, I can send you a link to this one. Be glad to. I have another one which is even more spectacular than this. I'll see if I can go back and find
So
it.
they follow the school of fish?
Yeah, the following School of Fish, probably Menhaden, but it might be something else as well. I've also, back in the day, I had a friend who would take me off to a fishing December or so for striped bass beyond the 3 mile limit, small back. But gannet flocks are what we went after. And so you have this going on all around you, meanwhile catching fish.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. But that can happen off Ocean City. Usually what I see when I see gannets are several, 15, 20 at a time, just flying along, heading north to their breeding grounds in the spring, or coming south in November to wherever they're going to winter and find fish. A lot of the winter birds are more dingy and brown, but whenever one dives, you can see that small splash. They really close their wings, and they can go down 50, 60.
How long do they stay under?
Sometimes a couple of minutes. Usually, when they're feeding like this, they pop up pretty quickly. And they're hitting 10, 15 seconds. You've got it. And they're powerful swimmers underwater, so their feet are toward the back. As a result, is when they take off after they pop up and maybe have a fish or whatever, they have to run along like a duck, diving duck. But they're not ducks. These are pelican-like. So that's the cool. Going again. Okay, that worked out well. Okay. Hopefully we'll see more. We probably aren't going to see a bunch, but maybe we'll see one or two. And since we're going to have lunch, soup at least at my place, which is on the 5th floor of a condo apartment, we might have a chance to look out over the water a little bit further and maybe see a couple passing by. I don't know with this weather. Pretty tough. It's terrible. All right, let's go to Cornell and make some notes here as to what we want to see here. Let's look at the plan. No, I'm not interested in it. There's one. Showed you a picture earlier. Pretty much the adults all look the same. On the Pacific Coast, they're a little darker than this. They used to be called the black brand. Now that's considered grace. If you look at the range of it, these are migration. They actually breed way up here, way far north. And we have a good wintering population here in the mid-Atlantic, which is why we sometimes may be able to see flocks of 60, 70, even 80 and more in the coastal bays in Ocean City. Whether they'll stay there or head down to Albemarle Sound or other places remains to be seen. But they winter roughly from New York City down to Norfolk in some numbers, breed way up here. They have a long way to go to get home. Okay.
Why is it brand?
Why the name? I don't know. Good question. Yeah.
Right.
I know the derivation of it. Yeah. I'm going to look at the Gadwall briefly because, again, of its breeding range. I'm going to keep harping on this a little bit. Here's a nice Gadwall. Has a nice big white. Basically, this is a speculum that's blue and mallard. It's purple and a black duck, and here it's very white. Female, very plain looking. As I say, if you blow the picture up, you can see the vermiculations in this wonderful featherlet here. I wanted to show you the range a little bit here. That Gadwall winters throughout the southern parts of the United States and migrates across this region here, but breeds up in these areas here. And this is part of the northern part of what you call the prairie potholes. And it's a big duck factory when it comes to dabbling and some diving ducks as well. And there are some very important reasons behind that are important for duck conservation. So I can also tell you, I think last time I gave you a hint that waterfowl and ducks in particular are increasing in number, especially dabblers and smaller sea ducks. And Gadwall has been increasing in populations. We're nowhere near the numbers we used to have in the 40s and 50s, but they are increasing and showing up and being easier to find. Okay. What else we got here?
You want to know Grant Goose? Austrian naturalist Giovanni Scopoli, 1769.
Austrian.
Yeah, Austrian, and it's burnt black. Brant means burnt or black.
Uh-huh, okay. Well, that would explain the Pacific race at least.
Right.
Like misspelled widget. Doesn't have a D. This is what I wanted to show you. A handsome duck. We'll see it at Oakley Street, I'm sure, when we finally get there. But where's the quack? That's a drake. And when you get a lot of them, it's pretty impressive. You know, if you go to Oakley Street, if they're down there in any kind of numbers, you'll hear a lot of that. You won't hear it quite as much. Couple of reasons for that.
Can you do the widget?
Yeah.
Thought it was a dance.
Yeah. First of all, the quacking that you hear, that you're familiar with, is barn yard ducks. They're done mainly by the females. Those quackings are mainly females. The male, even the male mallard doesn't quack a lot. It tends to much more have a wheezy kind of call that it uses. And the widgeon does it in spades. It has this very high pitched whistling type of call. And when there are lots of them, as we may get some like that, you may be able to hear it. It's quite a continuous ring to it. So not all ducks quack, despite something else we had to learn. And while we're on that, let's go to the longtail.
Okay.
I can give you the derivation of this guy's name in part. I think actually it goes better if I do sounds. If I remember correctly, I'll just song called him.
Sounds like a kid's toy.
Follow the dog.
Well, I
No.
get involved with sexism, but you can see why it got called. The other name for this country sometimes is South Southern.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the long-tailed duck,
It's the penguin for Batman.
That's kind of a nice name myself. I never really heard those on it. Okay. We looked at redheads and canvasbacks. Let's do, I think this works. Ringneck duck. So there's a handsome male, and again, you can't see the neck ring, which is a dark brown, somewhere down hidden in here. But this triangle here shows up at very long distances. What I wanted to do is compare it. I think it allows a comparison with the skull.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So here they are together. All right. Again, a blocky head, much bigger in the background. Yeah, look, kind of a top knot, but not the little tiny thing that you see in a lesser top. Okay, and this triangle again shows up really well at a distance. Much brighter than it's showing in this particular.
Yeah.
Okay, vessel skull has sort of a purplish sheen to the head. This is greenish to purple, but that's not as useful as just the head shape in general. It really is different looking. If the scalp were facing directly sideways, you'd see that more. But anyway, they are often found in similar habitats. If we got to Berlin and got to those ponds there, we'd probably find both species. Right. If we're lucky down there, we'll find greater scalp. That'd be cool as a moose, but we'll just have to see what happens. All right. So you've done that. Okay, let's do a loon at a time. So here's our breeding plumage bird. This is what we're gonna see.
Yeah.
There's the breeding plumage. Probably a female, she's got some chicks with her. And of course, loon is actually derived from loon for the moon, and hang on, let me. This is the ongoing call here, but I have heard it in the chop tank in the late spring. So a few do give that, and a few do.
Leg and heard that as the sun was going down. I thought somebody was getting murdered.
Like,
That's the female.
So the leaves got their beaks up.
the cormorants tilt them up, the loons keep their beaks on top. Yeah.
No, that's not, that's horizontal.
That's basically horizontal. A cormorant is more like this.
Okay.
Okay, if time allows, I'll go back to the double crested
Okay.
and try to show you that on the water. Well, let's do that. What the heck?
He's got something.
Okay. I think he's up it on the water here. I don't want to see it doing that. See if it's
Find your wings out.
Come on. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a noticeable tilt over, as opposed to being essentially horizontal. Thinner bill too, it's not a big dagger. This has been, it has a hook on the end, it's meant for grasping fish.
Wait, I have a question about the cormorants.
Uh-huh,
So I see them on the, in DC on the, oh my God, the canal.
Mhm.
And there'll be, trees that are completely dead and no foliage whatsoever. And they all love to flock there. Is it because they get the best of the sunlight to dry their,
that's in part, but they also nest in that, and they used to do that on Poplar Island, and they killed all the trees, so they had to start nesting on the ground or nesting elsewhere.
interesting.
Because the defecation actually kills, it's too acidic, it kills the trees, so they may still use them to dry out, but they probably aren't nesting on those trees. But that is the cause why the trees died, yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's see, or conclude. Catcher, yeah. Worth listening for this bird.
Yeah.
At the inlet. I think this one also had better call. Let's try this. Let's try this. Something you may hear, away from city limits, even before you see the bird. And it carries a long way. They often be on the jetty on the other side of the window. If it goes that long, it can go that long. This is a group of them, probably near the beginning. But it can go along like that. So there are several birds on it. Very loud. Yeah, very loud. A nice bird, one of those things where you feel it, you know what immediately what it is. Yeah. Big red bill, nice and tall, and noisy like this, and they breed in the back bays in Ocean City, so it's a sound you can hear in May and June as well. Let's see, we did the gamut, did the cormorant. Okay.
Question about the field.
Yes, let's go ahead and, I think I've gone through the ones I really want.
Do you really need for us to meet in Ocean City at 8 a.m.?
Yeah, I was gonna try 9, but then I thought if we want to go up to Indian River, and not be too late, because the weather's supposed to go south Friday night. So I thought, let's do it at 8. Daisy Mae and I, my dog, Daisy Mae and I will be there 6:45 or 7:30, whatever. And, we're gonna be there about an hour, so if you're a little behind, it's okay, but you might miss something.
Like your map.
The general approach is to do the inlet around an hour at the inlet itself. Then we'll hop in the cars. There's by the way, the bathroom is there. We can take a quick potty break there. We can then go around to the Oceanic Motel, which you passed on the way in to the inlet. And there's a sheltered balcony there that we birders, basically, they leave us alone. It gives us some altitude and lets us look over the back bay where the great cormorant picture that I took was, and maybe some loons closer in. We'll do that. Then we're going to go to Hooper's Restaurant, which is a crab house just across the drawbridge, or the West Ocean City side. If the mud flats are exposed there, that's a good place to see some cormorants and also a couple of gulls. And then from there, we're going to go to the Night Heron Restore. There's another very good clean potty stop and warm. We'll spend a few minutes there. There used to be a great colony of house finches there, very colorful colony, but they've eliminated all the brush there. So unfortunately, they're not there anymore. Then, depending on how my scouting goes, we'll try a couple of ponds that might be open, but I'll know that before it happens. We may go as far south as South Point on the West Ocean City side of the bay. Then we'll come back to our place, have your lunch. We'll have some vegetable-based soup, so if you're vegetarian, you'll be safe. And warm up a bit, and then we'll drive up to Indian River Inlet, which from there isn't so bad. Our place is at 76th Street, so we're halfway up to Ocean City anyway. And then we'll go up to Indian River. The sun will be kind of behind us a little bit, and if it's not too breezy, last year there were hundreds and hundreds of scoters. And we have the possibility, it looks like there's a half a dozen or more great cormorants there, some gannets in close, and all three scoters, and partly. So it will make that trip good. And then I'll cut you free. Get back from there. So that's the general itinerary. And again, freshwater ponds we'll have to see. I'm almost as positive as I sit here that the ponds at Berlin will not be available. They've been iced in before. They're too shallow. And that's too bad. And there's no other thing to do except to give you directions to go there sometime when you're heading that way. It's worth a stop and it's not that far.